Many years ago, I went through a deep conflict with a team that I cared about deeply. We had a lot of meetings together with that team, and we had the same goal, but we had different ideas of how to get to that goal. And the meetings became hard and tough, and oftentimes they escalated deeply. The disagreements became personal rifts as well, and I dreaded going to any of those meetings. In fact, I always knew the day before any of those meetings, my stomach would start to cramp, and I would have physical responses to some of the stress of those meetings. I would sleep poorly, because my mind was constantly spinning, thinking about the last meeting or the next meeting. And during the day when I had to work, I could barely focus because it was so difficult for me to focus on the tasks ahead. Because that conflict, it did something inside of me. And it was interesting because I was already a pastor at that time, and as pastors, we know the theology, right? We know a lot of the things that Jesus has said, and a lot of the things how we should behave. And this was a time where I personally was high on anxiety. And just a few weeks earlier, I had preached a verse on the book of Philippians, and I preached Philippians 4:6, and it says there, "Do not be anxious about anything." And when I was preaching about that, I had, as a young pastor, I had all types of advice. How you could be that and do that, and how to put it into, don't focus on your problem, just focus on God who's bad. I could say it all, But when rubber met the roads, it was a lot more difficult to actually put that into practice and to actually not feel anxious. I remember the moment when I was driving to one of those meetings. I had about a 20-25 minute drive, and it was one of those times where my stomach was cramping. I didn't feel peace whatsoever. I was very anxious in that moment. And as I was driving there, I was remembering that verse, "Do not be anxious about anything." And I started to pray. God, would you please just help me have peace as I go into that meeting? And another cramp hit my stomach. And I was pleading with God, please help me, because I want to come to this meeting with peace. And I started singing a song. I'm a bad singer, but since I was in a car by myself alone, there's this song that we always sang at school. It's an old church hymn. You might know it. It goes something like this. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roar, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. I stopped singing that song, and my chest felt still so tight. I could barely breathe. And another prayer and another cramp, and there was so much anxiety, and there wasn't peace, and I started to get frustrated because I know that God was commanding me not to be anxious somehow, but I couldn't shake it off. And I started to get angry with God. Why aren't you helping me? And why aren't you giving me peace? I'm doing all the right things. And then this verse popped into my mind again. Do not be anxious about anything. And I just wanted to scream, you just don't get it, God. You just don't get it. I'm trying. I'm doing all the right things, but you don't understand. It's not that easy to just shake it off, right? You just don't get it, God. I wonder if you have thought that before. You know, there's so many moments in our life where the Bible tells us such encouraging and good things, and you just feel like it's so hard for me to actually put this into practice, and I don't quite know how to. You know, I think about when Jesus told his disciples, "My yoke is easy to carry and the burden is light." And then you might go into your workplace and you might, try to shine the light of Christ, and you might get demoted or made fun of, and it doesn't feel like the yoke is light. It feels quite the opposite. And you just want to say, you just don't get it, God. It's like, or when life deals you a brutal hand sometimes, there's betrayal or grief or chronic pain. And the churchy answer is always like, well, God has a bigger plan, right? And it's meant to comfort, and sometimes it does, and sometimes it stings like salt in a wound. You know, as if God is just up there, unmoved, and just not truly getting your pain. Maybe that's why you sometimes feel distant from God. Maybe that's why you have even avoided church for a long time, because God just feels so stoic, so all-powerful, all in control, but so out of touch with the real human experience, so out of touch with your experience. We're currently in a series of talks where we look at the last 24 hours of Jesus' life before he was crucified on that Roman cross. Jesus had just celebrated, as we heard last week, the last meal with his closest friends. And now, so during the last meal, he also said, one of you is going to betray me. And so now Jesus was heading out from the place where he had the last meal, and he was just waiting to be picked up, betrayed by one of his friends, led to that Roman cross. And as we meet Jesus today in the story, we meet him at that final moment of waiting before all hell will break loose. You know, those last moments of waiting before something big happens, those are always the hardest, aren't they? The Sundays where I get to preach, I always, stand up there, and when I'm up here, I'm loving this, right? I could be here for 2 hours and chat. Like, this is great. This feels great. Just like a few minutes ago when I was down here, I just wanted to crawl in my bed and hide and just never come up here. Like the moment, those moments, right? The moments before a difficult test or difficult conversations that you have. Those are just the hardest moments. And that's the moment that we find Jesus in today, the moment before he's going to be picked up. And it's a moment where we experience Jesus as truly human. We will experience him in this story today as vulnerable and as relatable and as approachable. So quite different from that God who doesn't get us. We meet Jesus, the God in human nature, who's vulnerable, relatable, and acceptable. And I hope that at the end of the next, 15 minutes or so, you will be able to say, wow, I believe he gets me. I believe God gets me. So we'll look at the story, and we find Jesus at the place that is very special to him. So we read in Matthew 26, verse 34. It says here, "Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to them, 'Sit here while I go over there and pray.'" So in his last moment, Jesus is together with his closest friends, and he goes to a place called Gethsemane. Gethsemane is a garden, an olive grove just opposite of Jerusalem. It's a garden where Jesus has spent a lot of time in his life. Jesus didn't really have, during the last 3 years of his life, he was like a traveling preacher, so he didn't really have a home or bed to himself, but this was probably the closest place to home. This is about what it looks like today. So just a little bit of a slope, a beautiful garden, and a lot of olive trees there. So this would have been the place where Jesus went and where he spent a lot of time during his life. And now at that pivotal moment at the end of life, Jesus goes there. It's almost like Jesus goes to his safe place. He retreats to a place where he feels comfortable, where he had good experiences in his life, and maybe he can even replay some of those positive and good experiences, some of the laughs that he had with his friends while he was sitting there and just spending time. He goes to his safe place. For me, that's an utterly human thing that Jesus goes there, and I believe Jesus shows his humanity by retreating to his safe place. You know, that's almost like you and me. When you get very difficult news, where do you go? When you suffer or are sick, where do you find yourself? I know one of my safe places is my bed. It's like with the blanket on me, and I just want to leave the shutters down and just be by myself. That's where Jesus goes. He just goes to a safe place in this utterly difficult moment. And now we read about what Jesus experiences, and I find this so fascinating. It says he took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him. So Jesus had he had many people that followed him, and then he had a circle of 12 close friends. And then out of those 12, there were 3 that he was really, really tight with. And to all of the super important moments in his life, he invited those 3 to join him during that time. One of the moments, which is fascinating, was when Jesus had this event we call the Transfiguration. He went up on a mountain and he was shining in white, and they were seeing all the glory and all the majesty of who Jesus is. He truly is not just man, they saw. He must be truly God. And that was the 3 of them that were with Jesus on his most beautiful, most outstanding moment, and they are now with Jesus during his most difficult moment. And this is what it says about Jesus. And so he began to be sorrowful and to be troubled. We have 3 words here, there's one more following, that describe Jesus' emotional being, how he feels in that moment. And there's a progression of it getting deeper and deeper and worse and worse. So it says sorrowful here and troubled. So the New Testament that we're reading from is written in Greek, and those are the Greek words that are behind it. There's the first one, that's lupeo. It just means I'm full of sorrow. And then there's ademoneo, and this one that's saying more, that's saying I'm in anxiety. I have sorrow, no more, I have anxiety in this moment. That's what's said of Jesus. Isn't that fascinating? And then we continue reading, and then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. Perilupeo, it's like saying he's exceedingly sorrowful, and how sorrowful, even to the point of death. One of the Bible commentators was commenting on these verses and the language that's being used here, and he's saying Jesus in this moment is having a full-blown anxiety attack. That's the language that's used here. His anxiety is exceedingly sorrowful, even until death. Like, he might as well just die. Isn't that interesting? That Jesus, God in human flesh here, has an anxiety attack? Similar to how you maybe sometimes do or how I do. That somehow makes me empathize with him deeply, makes him close. So I think Jesus shows his humanity here in his full-blown anxiety attack. And we'll continue reading to learn about the humanity of Jesus. It says here, talking about the cup of suffering, Jesus then continues. It says, going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. May this cup be taken from me. The language of the cup in the ancient Near East where Jesus was living is an interesting one. It can be something quite positive. It can be like the celebration of a new alliance. So you know that from a wedding, when somebody gets up and he takes a glass and he says, let's raise our glasses to the wedding couple. It's a celebration of a new alliance. Kings would do that in the ancient world. They would raise their cups to celebrate new alliances that they made with other countries, other nations. And that's probably what I believe Jesus did in a last story when he raised the cup and says, this is the cup of the new covenant. I'm making a new alliance with you as my followers. So the cup can be something incredibly positive, but the cup can also be something quite negative and disturbing. It can be used to humiliate other people. So oftentimes what kings would do when they conquered other nations is they would take the king of the other nation, make him go on his knees, and then they would take bitter herbs, sometimes even poison, and make them swallow it so that they would die. There's this one story where a person from the ancient times, Crassus, is one of the Roman leaders. He would be captured by the Parthians, and they would put, you see it a little bit here on the picture, because he loved gold so much, they would put molten gold in a cup and pour it down his lungs so that he would die. It's almost like, if I were to put that in today's context, it's almost like, if a German moves over to England and a British person would come and make you drink some English beer. Humiliation, that is, and hardship, And I think, when Jesus in this text is talking about the cup that he needs to swallow, the cup that he needs to drink, he's talking symbolically about the devil, the powers of darkness that are shoving down the cup to his death. He's talking about humanity with all its full forces of evil that make Jesus suffer and die when they yell, crucify and sacrifice him. By drinking that cup on the cross that follows, Jesus, he experienced the full cup, the full force of human evil and hatred. So Jesus showed his humanity by truly suffering under human evil to the fullest. If you're honest, and I'm honest, we have suffered under human evil too, haven't we? We've had people betraying us. We have just had family members, turn against us, or we've had others turn against our family members. And there's just so much evil in this world. And I'm part of it. I've caused evil as well, and I've caused suffering as well. But I've also experienced it. Who has also experienced the full load of human evil? It's Jesus in this story. He had to drink that cup. And we'll continue to read, and we see Jesus alone. Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. The disciples are sleeping. He asked his closest friends to be with him, to watch with him. And they're sleeping. And Jesus says, couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour? He asked Peter. Watch out and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Scientists have now discovered a human response to deep trouble and danger. And we always talk about the fight and flight. You want to fight or you want to run away from the situation. And now there's different F words that scientists add. So there's one that they call flop. So it's when you're in deep danger or trouble, you fight or you flight or you flop. And that's what the disciples do, right? They just cannot deal with the situation. They see Jesus over there, the one that they've been following, and he's just crying and a full-blown anxiety attack. And they're like, I don't know how to deal with this. And they just sleep. They leave him alone. Jesus, in this pivotal moment of his life, he's just alone. There's nobody anymore by his side that can truly help him, that can truly stand up for him. And that too, that's just a real human experience, isn't it? I remember so well when I was suffering under long COVID, and for like 6 months or so, it was hard for me after I was infected with COVID to actually get out of bed. I know it was interesting because in the beginning, people were so compassionate with me and they were praying for me and those type of things. And after a while, you're just in your bed, and it's nice that they're praying for me and they're compassionate with me, but ultimately, I'm in my bed alone. You know, nobody can carry that weight that I have. And this loneliness, this being alone, is an utterly human experience, isn't it? They're just things that we suffer alone. And Jesus, in this story, he shows his full humanity in the existential pain of loneliness. He's all by himself. Then we see Jesus praying. It continues and it says, he went away for a second time and he prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." Just skip over that and pretend like it didn't happen. And when he came back, he found them sleeping again. So Jesus is praying and he finds the disciples sleeping because their eyes were heavy. And he left them and went away one more time and prayed the third time, saying the same thing over and over again. Have you been in a situation where you so hoped for a situation to change, and you prayed and you prayed and you prayed, and nothing changed? I mean, we see Jesus changing here, right? Because his responses with, "Well, but your will, not mine, be done." But his situation, his circumstance, it stayed the same. It's like the only answer that he got to his desperate plead and to his desperate prayer was just, it just has to happen this way. That's human too, isn't it? That's your experience and it's mine. You know, it's interesting when we talk about unanswered prayer, and I do this all the time. I want to give 5 logical reasons why sometimes your prayers aren't, seem to be answered, or at least not the way you want it. And that's, 5 logical. And the answer that I want to give today is, well, Jesus experienced that, right? He was in Gethsemane and he wasn't praying once or twice. He was praying 3 times or much more often, and yet his situation didn't change. He still had to go to that cross. Do you understand how Jesus gets you? Because he's been in that situation and experiences the type of things that you experience. Like for me, that changes how I perceive Jesus, because Jesus, he shows his humanity too when his plea, his cry is unfulfilled. At the end of the story, we come to his arrest. It says, "Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, 'Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of the sinners.'" It's interesting that Jesus uses here the words "the Son of Man." In the Old Testament, when you read the later part of the Old Testament, the Son of Man became quite an important role. And when they were talking about the Savior of the world, some of the prophets, they were using the terminology "the Son of Man." But in the beginning of the Bible, when the phrase "the Son of Man" was used, it was merely used to talk about very normal human beings. And Jesus is saying here, look, the hour has come, and me, this very normal human being, who's also God in flesh, right? But also just the Son of Man, I'm going to be delivered in the hands of the sinners. And so he says, "Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." I believe, and this is to summarize the story, the band can come back up. In Gethsemane, the story that we just read, we learned Jesus is truly, you could even say, the truest human. Just like you, in your humanity, he experiences existential pain. He experiences anxiety attack, human burden, abandonment, an unfulfilled prayer. Like Jesus really is just truly human, just like you. It's interesting because we believe that God is almighty and he has everything under control. And we'll actually see that next week in the next story where Jesus suddenly seems absolutely in control again. But that's not the only picture of God, and it's not the full picture of God, because in this story, more than any other story in the Bible, I believe, we learn that God is not sterile and removed and far away and out of touch and unmoved by emotion. Jesus has experienced it all. He has gone through it all. Jesus doesn't just understand what you've been through. He has been through it himself. I want to invite you today to come to God with your pain. God might not have an easy answer for you why you experience this pain, and God might not give you a 5-point list. But you can trust that he understands. Sometimes I do this with my wife because both of us are oftentimes quite quick when I or her comes to the other with problems or experiences that we just went through. It's easy for us to just come and give advice. Well, you should just, or have you thought about? And so oftentimes when we come into those type of conversations, we start by saying, I don't want advice right now. I just want you to get me. So let me share with you. And this is exactly how we get to come to Jesus. Not to get solutions for everything, but to simply be with this incredible person who gets the pain that you've been through. Imagine we can have a relationship with God who doesn't just tolerate your pain, but who is actually lived it. A God who just gets who you are. This is the message and it's the marvel of Jesus. He is a God. He is God who gets you. He is God who's been you. Let me pray and then we worship him. Jesus, thank you that you went through all of this so that we can know that you're not far removed, sterile to our pain, but that you fully get us. Thank you, Jesus.